I don't know when it started, the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my husband, Jake. Maybe it was 6 months ago, maybe a year. I'd stopped marking time the way I used to, back when our life felt like a steady, unshakable thing. We'd been married 8 years, high school sweethearts who'd made it through college, first jobs, and a mortgage on a modest split level in the Chicago suburbs. Jake was my rock, the guy who'd carried me over the threshold of that house when we moved in, laughing as he nearly dropped me on the hardwood floor we couldn't afford to refinish. Back then, our days had a rhythm. He'd leave for work at 7:30 a.m., gym bag slung over his shoulder, his dark hair still damp from the shower. I'd kiss him goodbye at the door, his stubble scratching my cheek, and he'd be home by 6 p.m. sharp. I'd have dinner ready, nothing gourmet, just chicken and rice or spaghetti with sauce from a jar, and he'd plant a kiss on my forehead before we sank into the couch, scrolling Netflix until one of us dozed off. That was us, Jake and Sarah, the couple who dodged the clichés of fading marriages. Or so I'd convinced myself. The shift crept in slowly, so subtle I didn't notice it at first. Started with the garage. He'd pull into the driveway after work and just sit there longer than he used to. I'd peek out the kitchen window, stirring a pot of soup or wiping down the counter, and see his silhouette hunched over his phone, the blue glow lighting up his face. His thumbs would move fast, tapping out messages he never shared. "Work stuff," he'd mutter when he finally shuffled inside, shoving the phone into his pocket before I could ask more. I didn't push, not then. Jake was a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm downtown, and I knew the job could get hectic. Clients demanding last-minute changes, blueprints that wouldn't line up. He'd always had stories about the chaos. I told myself it was normal, that he was just stressed. But then the late nights started stacking up. "Gotta finish some specs," he'd text me at 5 p.m., casual as anything, and I'd eat alone at the kitchen table, the TV flickering in the background to drown out the quiet. When he'd roll in 9, 10, sometimes pushing 11, he'd smell different. Not like the sawdust or sweat I'd expect from a site visit, but like something floral, rich, expensive. Perfume. Not mine. I've worn the same vanilla body spray from Target since college, a $5 bottle that barely lingers past lunch. This was something else, something that clung to his shirts and followed him into the room. "Crowded elevator." He'd chuckle when I mentioned it once, brushing past me to grab a beer from the fridge. "You know how those office girls are, dousing themselves in whatever's trending." I'd nod, force a smile, but it stuck with me, a splinter under my skin. The excuses piled up, meetings that ran long, a new client who wouldn't take no for an answer, a site inspection he couldn't skip. He started locking his phone too, which he'd never done before. I'd catch him on the couch, smirking at the screen, a private, lopsided grin that didn't match the Jake I knew, and when I'd lean over, casual as I could, and ask who he was texting, he'd say, "Just Dave from work, babe." He's a riot. Dave. The site foreman with a beer gut and a loud laugh, who'd come to our barbecue last summer and spilled ketchup on the deck. Right. I wanted to believe him, but the splinter dug deeper. It wasn't just the phone or the perfume, it was the way he'd stopped looking at me. Really looking. His eyes would slide past mine like I was part of the furniture now, a fixture he didn't need to notice anymore. I tried to ignore it. God knows I tried. I'd lie awake at night, his snores rumbling beside me, and replay every moment, searching for the crack I'd missed. Jake wasn't the cheating type, he was steady, dependable, the guy who'd driven 3 hours to bring me soup when I had the flu in college, who'd teared up at our wedding when I walked down the aisle in that second-hand dress with the lace hem I'd hemmed myself. We'd built something real, hadn't we? A life with framed photos on the mantle. Us at the Grand Canyon, us at his cousin's lake house, us smiling at our reception with cake smeared on our faces. But the doubts grew louder, a buzzing in my head that drowned out the reassurances I fed myself. I started noticing more. The way he'd shower right when he got home, like he was washing something off. The receipts I'd find in his pockets for lunches at places we'd never been together. The faint tan line on his ring finger, like he'd slipped it off and back on too many times. My gut twisted, whispering truths I didn't want to hear. I couldn't keep it in anymore, so I spilled it all to my best friend, Lisa, over coffee one Saturday. We met at our usual spot, a cramped cafe on Clark Street with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed in years. She'd been my rock since high school, the one who'd talked me through every fight with Jake back when we were kids arguing over prom plans. I laid it out. Every late night, every whiff of perfume, every locked screen smirk. She stirred her latte, frowning at me over the rim of her cup. "You're overthinking this, Sarah," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Jake's not the type. He's too boring, no offense. He's not out there living some double life, he's just a guy with a job and a mortgage." I laughed, but it was thin, brittle. "Maybe," I said, swirling my untouched coffee. "But it doesn't feel right." She sighed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You've been stressed at work, right? Maybe you're projecting. Give it time, he'll snap out of whatever this is." I nodded, wanting to believe her, but the buzzing didn't stop. Lisa didn't see the Jake I saw now, the one who'd slipped away from me inch by inch. That night I couldn't sleep. Jake was sprawled on the couch, passed out with a beer bottle tipped over on the cushion, the TV droning some late-night infomercial. I grabbed my laptop from the kitchen counter and sat at the table, the glow of the screen harsh against the dark. I didn't plan it, it just happened. My fingers typed "Private Investigators Chicago" into the search bar, and I scrolled through the results, heart pounding. Most of the sites looked like scams, grainy photos of guys in trench coats, promises of discreet surveillance that sounded too good to be true. But then I found Tony. His page was bare bones, no flashy graphics, just a phone number and a list. Infidelity investigations, background checks, missing persons. Something about the simplicity hooked me. I hesitated, cursor hovering over the call button, then grabbed my phone and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. It was late, past midnight, but he picked up on the third ring. "Tony," he grunted, voice rough like he'd smoked a pack that day. "What's the situation? No small talk, no bullshit." I liked that. I told him everything. Jake's routine, the late nights, the perfume, the locked phone, the way my gut wouldn't shut up. "I just need to know," I said, my voice breaking at the edges. "If I'm wrong, I'll apologize to him. If I'm right, I don't know what I'll do." He didn't flinch. "Give me his schedule. I'll get you answers. $500 up front, more if it drags on." I agreed, wired the money from my personal savings, the account I'd kept separate since my dad drilled into me never to merge everything, even in marriage, and hung up, my hands trembling. The waiting was torture. For a week I drifted through my days like a ghost. I'd go to work at the insurance office downtown, processing claims in a gray cubicle that smelled like stale coffee, then come home to an empty house, Jake's texts about late meetings lighting up my phone. I'd jump every time it buzzed, expecting Tony, but it was always spam or Lisa checking in with her cheerful, "How you holding up?" Jake didn't seem to notice I was different. He'd stumble in late, toss his keys on the counter and ramble about work. Some new project in Lincoln Park, a client who wanted granite instead of quartz, like nothing had changed. I'd nod, smile, my stomach a knot of acid, wondering what Tony was uncovering. I pictured him out there, tailing Jake in some beat-up sedan, snapping photos from a distance. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a movie, one of those gritty Lifetime dramas my mom used to watch. But this was my life and the stakes were real. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, it happened. I was folding laundry in the living room, Jake's gym socks of all things, the irony thick enough to choke on, when my phone lit up on the coffee table. Tony's name flashed across the screen. My heart slammed into my ribs, hard enough I thought I'd bruise. "Sarah, you might want to sit down for this," he said when I answered, his voice low and steady. I sank onto the couch, clutching a sock like it could anchor me. "What did you find?" I whispered, barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears. "Meet me at the cafe on Diversey in an hour." "I don't do this over the phone." He hung up before I could argue. I don't remember driving there. My hands were on the wheel, the streets blurred past, but my mind was blank, a white-hot void of dread. The cafe was a dingy little place, dim and quiet, with chipped mugs and a waitress who didn't bother making eye contact. Tony was already there, a stocky guy in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a leather jacket that looked like it had been through a war. He didn't smile, didn't waste time with pleasantries, just slid a manila envelope across the table as I sat down. "Take your time," he said, sipping his black coffee. My hands shook as I opened it, the flap tearing under my fingers. Photos spilled out, glossy, sharp, like something out of a nightmare. There was Jake in his gray suit, the one I'd ironed for him last month when he'd said he had a big meeting, walking out of a restaurant downtown. His arm was around a woman, their hands linked, fingers laced like they'd done it 1,000 times. Another shot. Them in our SUV, the one we'd bought 3 years ago for road trips to Wisconsin we never took anymore. kissing in the front seat, his hand on her neck, her fingers in his hair. My chest tightened, breath catching like I'd been punched. I flipped to the next one and nearly dropped it. The woman's face, clear as day, was Emily. His assistant. The perky 26-year-old who'd brought us cupcakes at the company picnic last summer, all smiles and, "Oh, you must be Sarah," while she shook my hand with her manicured nails. I'd liked her, thought she was sweet, harmless. I'd even told Jake once how nice it was he had someone competent at work. And now she was kissing my husband, her lipstick smudged on his mouth. I stared at the photos, my coffee untouched, the steam curling up and disappearing. Tony watched me, his face unreadable. "There's more," he said finally, voice low enough not to carry. "He's not just screwing around. He's got a whole setup." My head snapped up, eyes burning. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the leather of his jacket creaking. I followed them after the restaurant. They went to an apartment. Nice place, high-rise on Michigan Avenue. He's got keys, groceries, the works. She's there all the time. Bathrobe on the balcony, coffee in the morning like it's their damn home. He slid another photo across. Jake carrying a paper bag from Whole Foods into a sleek, glass-fronted building, Emily behind him in leggings and a hoodie, her hair in a messy bun. Then one of her alone, leaning on the railing with a mug, barefoot, looking out over the city like she owned it. Second life. My husband had a second life and I didn't even know how he'd paid for it. We had a joint account, a house with a leaky roof we couldn't afford to fix. Where was the money coming from? Had he been siphoning it off, lying about bonuses, dipping into savings I didn't check because I trusted him? I don't know how long I sat there, the photos spread out in front of me like a crime scene. Tony didn't rush me, he just waited, sipping his coffee, the clink of his mug against the table the only sound. My mind raced, piecing together every moment I'd missed. The business trips he'd taken last fall, the new suits he'd bought without explaining how, the way he'd stopped complaining about money even though I knew his salary hadn't changed. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, and I'd been too blind, too stupid, to see it. Finally, I shoved the photos back into the envelope, my hand steady now, cold. "How long?" I asked, my voice hoarse like I'd been screaming. "Hard to say without more digging," Tony said, scratching his stubble. "At least a few months based on how comfortable they looked. Could be longer. Could be a year." "A year." My stomach lurched. "Thanks," I said, standing up. I pulled $200 in cash from my purse, crumpled 20s I'd grabbed from my desk drawer, and handed it to him. He nodded, pocketed it, and didn't ask what I was going to do next. I didn't offer. I drove home in a daze, the envelope burning a hole in the passenger seat, the city lights smearing past my windshield. That night I waited for Jake. I didn't cook dinner, didn't turn on the TV, just sat on the couch with the envelope open in front of me, photos fanned out on the coffee table. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock above the mantel. He walked in at 11 p.m. humming some tune I didn't recognize, something upbeat, careless, his keys jangling as he tossed them on the counter. "Hey babe," he started, then stopped dead when he saw me. His eyes flicked to the photos, then back to my face, widening in a way I'd never seen before. "What's this?" he stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I was too hollow for that. I picked up the spare keys Tony had copied from Jake's set, the ones to that downtown apartment, and threw them onto the table. They clattered against the wood, loud in the stillness. "How long, Jake?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Sarah, how long?" I repeated, louder, sharper, cutting him off. His shoulders slumped, and he looked away, staring at the floor like it could swallow him whole. "A year," he mumbled finally, so quiet I almost missed it. It didn't mean anything, I swear. A year. 365 days of lies, of me cooking his meals and washing his clothes while he built a life with her. "Get out," I said, barely above a whisper, but it landed like a gunshot. He didn't argue. He grabbed his keys. Not the apartment ones, those stayed where I'd thrown them, and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there, staring at the photos, the keys, the wreckage of 8 years scattered across the table. My mind spun, replaying every moment. The way he'd hugged me last Christmas, tight and warm, while he was already hers. The anniversary dinner we'd had in June at that Italian place downtown, where he'd held my hand across the table and told me he loved me. Had he gone to her after, kissed her with the same mouth? The numbness held me together until dawn, when the first light crept through the blinds and something shifted. The hollow feeling burned away, replaced by something sharper, colder, anger, pure and focused. I wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to let him walk away with everything while I crumbled. So I planned. The next morning while he was at work, probably with her, tangled in sheets I'd never see, I grabbed my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. $42,000 sat there, our savings from years of scraping by, my overtime at the insurance office, his bonuses we'd tucked away for a future we'd never have. I opened a new account in my name only, my fingers flying over the keys as I transferred every penny. I watched the balance drop to zero on his end, a clean slate that felt like a middle finger. Then I called a locksmith, a guy named Mike who'd fixed our back door a few years ago after a storm blew it open. "Can you come today?" I asked, my voice calm, businesslike. He was there by noon, rekeying the house, front door, back door, garage, while I stood in the kitchen sipping coffee that had gone cold. Jake wasn't getting back in, not here, not ever. But I wasn't done. I scanned the photos into my computer, every damning one, my hands steady now, deliberate. I opened my email and started typing. First I sent them to his boss, Richard, a stern guy with a buzz cut and a family values spiel he trotted out at every company picnic. Subject: unprofessional conduct. Message: thought you should know what your project manager's been up to on company time. Check the attachments. Attach. Then I pulled up his mother's email, Linda, the woman who'd called me the daughter she never had, and sent me handwritten recipes for Jake's favorite pot roast. Subject: your son. No message, just the photos. Jake and Emily kissing, Jake carrying groceries into that apartment, Emily on the balcony like some smug queen. Attach. I pictured her opening it at her kitchen table in Naperville, her coffee cup slipping from her hands, her perfect image of her good boy shattering. It wasn't kind, but it felt right. Jake texted me that afternoon, a flood of messages lighting up my phone. "Sarah, let's talk. I messed up. I'm sorry. Where's the money? What did you do?" I didn't reply. I let him stew, let him figure out the locks wouldn't work when he tried them. He showed up that night, banging on the door, his voice muffled through the wood. "Sarah, come on, open up. We can fix this. I love you." I stood on the other side, arms crossed, watching his shadow shift through the blinds. He pounded for 10 minutes, maybe 15, before his footsteps faded down the driveway. The next day I heard through Lisa, who'd gotten it from a mutual friend, Karen, who worked at Jake's firm, that Emily had kicked him out of the apartment. Turns out he couldn't cover the rent without my half of our income, and she wasn't sticking around for a broke cheater. He was crashing on Dave's couch now, the real Dave who'd apparently told Karen that Jake was a mess, unshaven, drinking too much, whining about how I'd ruined him. Good. It's been a month since that night. The house feels cavernous without him, the silence thick enough to choke on. I walk past his side of the closet every morning, still half full of shirts I haven't touched, and wonder if I'll ever stop seeing him in every corner. I don't miss him, not the real him, the one who'd lied to my face for a year while I played the dutiful wife. I miss the idea of him, the Jake I'd built in my head, but that guy's gone, maybe never existed. Lisa thinks I went too far. The money, the emails, the locks. "You could have just left him, Sarah," she said over wine at her place last week, her brow furrowed. "You didn't have to burn it all down." I shrugged, swirling the Pinot in my glass. "He burned it first. I just made sure he felt the heat." She didn't argue after that. "I'm keeping the $42,000, or what's left after Tony's fees and Mike's bill. I've thought about a trip. Somewhere warm like Florida or Mexico where I could lie on a beach and let the sun bleach out the last year. Or maybe I'll stay here, repaint the living room, rip out the carpet we picked together and put down something new. I don't know yet. For now, I'm just sitting with it, figuring out who I am without him. The anger's still there, simmering, but it's quieter now, a steady hum instead of a roar. I'm not proud of the wreckage I left behind. The shattered trust, the emptied account, the emails that probably broke his mother's heart, but I don't regret it either. He took my faith in us, my time, my stupid, naive belief that we were untouchable. I took everything else. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to start over.